It's that time, folks. Why we're all here. My name is Steve Dunlop. I'm a past president of this wonderful organization, the Deadline Club, and thank you all for coming. We've got a jam-packed program, so I'm not going to waste any time. To introduce our first honoree this afternoon, I'd like to call up Arturo Rimes. He's a CBS News colleague of mine, former executive producer of CBS Evening News Plus, and has been with the network for a long time. So, Arturo, you have the honor of introducing our first honoree. Come on up.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Steve. When Steve asked me to introduce Bill for this induction, I didn't hesitate because Bill is one of my heroes. He has performed his 40 years, more than 40 years, of journalistic duties with honor, grace, a calmness, and courage, and an unmistakable coolness, which, if anyone knows him, is emblematic of the signature scarves that he wears across his neck. The Deadline Club has inducted nearly 100 journalists into its Hall of Fame since it was created in 1975. Each of them have been a vivid reminder of the great responsibility we as journalists have, and has been a North Star to all of us who continue to carry that burden. This class of inductees is no different. For me, Bill is no different. As the New York City chapter of the Society of Professional Journalists, your mission is an important one, now more than ever. Part of that mission is to stimulate high standards and ethical behavior in journalism, as well as to foster excellence in journalism. Bill Whitaker embodies all of that. You may know Bill as a native son of Philadelphia, but what you may not know is as a younger man, he favored history more than journalism. He holds a degree in American history and a master's in African American studies. He would use that historical knowledge throughout his journalism, starting, as most of us, in the trenches of local news, until CBS recognized his talents and made him a correspondent in Atlanta and then Tokyo. I first met Bill a decade after he had been back in the States, based in Los Angeles, working primarily for the CBS Evening News, where I was, at the time, a young producer. His professionalism showed in every piece that he fronted, whether it was wildfires or presidential politics. He cared about each script. He practiced what the late author Toni Morrison coined the purposefulness of each written word. It is that which we get to see every Sunday as he conducts his interviews, crafts his pieces for 60 Minutes, now in his 12th season. The work mattered to him. Journalism matters to him. The history of the Deadline Club says at its founding, there were 20 daily newspapers, 3 wire services, 8 radio outlets, and no television stations in New York City. Times have certainly changed. The platforms have evolved. The profession is being challenged. But the mission has stayed the same: foster excellence in journalism. And with that, I am proud to introduce an example of that excellence, Bill Whitaker.
I'm sorry I can't be with you this evening. I'm on assignment here in Berlin. Thank you so much for this induction into the Hall of Fame. This is a tremendous honor. Anyone who works in broadcast news knows this is a deeply collaborative endeavor. You can't see them working behind the camera, but I'm here with some of the best photographers, sound techs, producers, associate producers, and fixers in the business. They are helping me here today, and they have helped me throughout my career. I would not be receiving this award were it not for these friends and colleagues. This job has taken me all over the world. I've been to 61 countries, to every continent but Antarctica. I've met popes and presidents, actors and athletes, and some of the most selfless service members, teachers, parents, and everyday citizens whose stories I felt privileged to tell. And that's what this work is to me, a privilege. The privilege to ask questions, to listen, to understand what drives people, their hopes, their frustrations, their choices, their creativity. This is what keeps this job endlessly fascinating. It's fascinating and it's important. What the press does matters, especially in a democracy like ours. We give citizens the information they need to make informed decisions about where we, the people, want this country to go and how we should get there. We hold power to account. We shine a spotlight into dark spaces to expose corruption and graft. We present facts to fend off lies and disinformation. And in that, we are necessary for this democracy. The press was written into the Constitution for a reason. I pray we stand strong in the face of the storm swirling around us, at a time when truth is under attack, when facts are twisted and trust is tested. This award isn't just a recognition, it's a challenge, a reminder that our job isn't to bow to pressure, but to push back with facts, not to retreat, but to report. If there ever was a moment for this to be done boldly, bravely, and relentlessly, it is now. And to receive an award for doing something I like, something I love, well, it just doesn't get any better than this. Thank you for this honor.
Alturo's going to accept this on behalf of Bill, who couldn't be here, obviously.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Julie Walker. I'm AP correspondent for radio and for print. And I'm the Deadline Club Awards chair. As you heard earlier, a reminder, our annual awards open next month. All the info is on our website, along with info about being an awards judge. So please join us if you can. Now I'd like to congratulate all our Hall of Fame awardees and introduce Jesse Angelo. He's the former publisher and CEO of the New York Post, and he'll be introducing Keith Kelly. Keith Kelly is my former teammate for the Artists and Writers softball game. Jesse, please come on up here. And again, Keith, congratulations.
Allow me to set the scene for you. It's May 2000 in the New York Post newsroom. Freshly anointed Wall Street beat reporter Jesse Angelo, age 26 and very unsure of himself, takes his seat in the business section next to his new colleague, Keith Kelly. It was another era when the people who ran magazines strode across the media landscape like colossi. Cy Newhouse, Steve Florio, James Truman, Richard Mad Dog Beckman. And while some of those bold-faced names still have single moniker recognition, here's looking at you, Tina, Anna, Graydon. Coverage of the media now is diffuse, unfocused, corruptible, and corrupted, always weaponized. But 25 years ago, media coverage was scintillating, must-read, scandalous, when that word still meant something. And the red-hot center of it was Keith Kelly's Media Inc. column. The Condé Nast holiday lunch seating plan got a 2-page spread in the newspaper. Keith. The launch party of Talk Magazine, at Liberty Island no less, needed a publication plan akin to the Super Bowl, since it went late into the night and had to span 3 editions. Keith. The Frank Gehry cafeteria was simply the most important story in the history of mankind. All Keith. Sitting next to Keith was an education, an honor, and so much fun. He would call the office of one of the aforementioned big shots, and in his famous gravel-inflected voice say, Keith Kelly here, is he available? Was that a good imitation? Okay. A message would be taken by a secretary, and Keith and I would then sit back and joke about how long it would take for them to call back, usually sub 5 minutes. And the reason they called back wasn't that they were scared, though scared they certainly were, and it wasn't because they wanted to spin Keith out of it, though they certainly tried in vain to do so many times. It was because they needed to know what Keith knew. In the age before cell phones and internet ubiquity, Keith had the goods. Every time. And if you knew what he knew before you got to lunch at Michael's, you just might get ahead of the gossip curve or even save your job. Keith made me understand what makes a truly great beat reporter. It's not about being the apex predator. It's about being so deeply embedded in the ecosystem, like water or sunlight, that the ecosystem does not exist without you, or it's so radically changed without you as to be unrecognizable. Not coincidentally, about then I realized I was never going to be a great beat reporter, and that was that. As good a journo as Keith is also how decent a man he is. He never punched down in his column. He was never cruel. He was always fair. And he was completely incorruptible. Many media reporters become enthralled by their beat and develop delusions of grandeur. They think, I can be a media mogul too. It doesn't look too hard. Some succeed, most do not. But Keith never really cared about all the glitz and glamour. He lived in Stuytown with his wife, Pat, an oncology nurse at MSK. His sister, Kathy, was a narcotics detective in Brooklyn North. On the weekends, he didn't go to the Hamptons. He hung out with his boys. Rory is a firefighter now and a captain in the Marine Reserves. Luke is an EMT. Eamon just took the FDNY test. I assure you, Keith is more proud of them than any scoop he ever got in the newspaper. There are people who covered the media beat with more flair than Keith, more splashy book deals and more magazine profiles, more snark and more noise. But nobody ever covered it better than Keith or with more integrity, period. Ladies and gentlemen, Keith Kelly.
Thank you, Jesse, for that warm introduction. And a heartfelt thanks to my peers and colleagues and the Deadline Club. It's quite an honor to be getting honored at the 100th anniversary of the Deadline Club. Pretty amazing streak. I also want to acknowledge my 3 sons, which Jesse already did. He's correct. They are my pride and joy. And all credit to them, or most of the credit, goes to my lovely wife of 31 years, Pat Walsh, Irish-born. A lot of integrity there. And a big thank you to New York Post and Strauss for letting my freeloading relatives sit at your tables. I just returned from a short vacation in Spain. And one of the words I learned there, the phrase, que divertido. It translates roughly to what joy. But it's like a much richer experience. It's the joy of the colossal experience, the whole media, the whole entertainment, friends, good times. And what joy. That kind of reflects my outlook on my whole career when I look back on it, other than a few bumps in the road here and there. There was never really a clear path in my career. It was like broken field running. You know, some people set out, oh, I'm going to do this, and they zoom up. I got out from a small school, the SUNY Oneonta, English lit major and a journalism minor. Spent a year looking. I was doing Sears paint salesman, employee number 11411, Division 30. I worked at Danny Sheen's pub. Danny was 3 generations of pub owners, but now he was a real estate and insurance guy. And when you see I wasn't having any luck getting the journalism job, he says, do you want to sell insurance? I can set you up. I'm like, I don't know. And I was working for a bricklayer as a laborer and an IBI security guard, unarmed, of course. So I kept running into the city, reading the New York Times classified ads and trying to get those jobs. They went nowhere. So finally I said, I'll try a different tack. I'm going to start sending cover letters to individual editor-in-chiefs of like weekly papers. So one landed on the desk of Vicki Penner-Katz at the Smithtown News on Long Island. She called me in. She gave me a writing test. And she pretty much hired me on the spot. And I always remember her words. She said, I'm going to save your cover letter, and I'm going to give it back to you someday, because someday you're going to be famous. So I guess since I'm here, Vicki, you are correct. Thank you for believing me and having faith when I really needed it as a 22-year-old. From the Smithtown News, I moved to McGraw-Hill, where I met John Friedman, who became a lifelong friend. He writes for us now. He was giving me good guidance when I decided to save up over $1,000 and set off for Belfast to freelance. I came back dead broke, but I had the equivalent of a grad school experience covering wars and riots. A couple of people got shot dead close by. Kind of interesting. And I figured this will launch me on my career as a swashbuckling foreign correspondent. Well, that didn't happen. So another zigzag. Somehow or another, I got into the media niche. First with Jack O'Dwyer's newsletter. Then he fired me. I don't know why I did that, but one of my buddies there said, Magazine Week up in Boston is looking for a managing editor. So I went up there for a while. Then I said, Magazine Week, it should be in New York. So then I got back down to New York. Went from Magazine Week to Advertising Age, which was, the Bible of the media world at the time. It had such clout that when John Kennedy Jr. and his partner Matt Berman were getting ready to launch George Magazine, the first sit-down interview right before they launched was with me, Ad Age. 60-inch story, color pictures, and boy, was the New York Times infuriated that they had to sit with the great unwashed masses a week later for the general press conference. They were sitting there saying, we got 7 million circulation, you only got 75. I don't know what they, like, yeah, but we're in color, you're still in black and white, So I went from, I guess it was a few years of Daily News. Pete Hamill became the editor. He was like one of my boyhood idols. He was a Brooklyn guy. I was born in Brooklyn. As editor-in-chief, he realized that the Post was kicking the Daily News' butt on the media coverage. So once again, he reached out to me and said, would you be interested in doing a media column for the Daily News? But I saw, to me, that's elevating your standard. That's the major leagues. Big City Daily. Then he had a falling out with the owner and they fired him. I got one great scoop towards the end of my run at the Daily News. News Corp was going to sell a 50% interest in TV Guide to a company controlled by John Malone. So I'm like, Now, 10 years earlier, they had paid $3 billion for it. It's hard to believe now, but it was a digest-side magazine that sold millions and millions of copies every week in supermarkets. But now it was kind of falling on harder times. So I get this scoop, and the next day they announced the deal. Everybody was, how the hell did he get it? I don't know if I can disclose this. The source has passed away. Maybe I'll get Vanity Fair to write about it. So a few months later, Shana Antunes comes by. She was the then business editor and said, we have a Sunday paper now. We're expanding staff. Would you be interested in writing for the Post? I'm like, well, I have great personal stock and personal loyalty, but Pete's gone. What's your offer? So they came up with a good offer. I spent many, many great years there. And 23 years. I figured, maybe I'll be there for a couple more years, trip around again. 23-year run. It was one of the most enjoyable runs, I think, ever. And then retirement rolls around. Many great scoops. 1 or 2 times people tried to recruit me away from there, but what I was doing and what the Post wanted done perfectly coincided. We break news. We're not going to do these 5,000-word analysis stories. We break news. They loved it, and I loved it. Then retirement time comes around. You got to clear out for the next generation. So I figured, well, you know what I like to do? I like to buy a weekly paper in my neighborhood, and I figured that'd be a nice thing to do. It wouldn't be too hard. So I contact Kyle Pope. I know he had been running these papers, and he says, and then whatever, the owner, it didn't work out. He doesn't sell me for the paper, but Jean Strauss is looking for a new editor of her paper. She said, Alex, Gelber is leaving at the end of the year. Would you be interested in taking over the 4 city papers? So I'm like, entrepreneur making no money or running for profitable 4 newspapers. So I dove right in. Now people say, what are you doing at this stage of your career? I said, well, it's like that Bob Dylan song, Tangled Up in Blue. I just keep on keeping on. Yeah. And when I look back on it, I go back to my original thing. What joy. It's going to be a wild year in New York coming up. We're going to have a blast. And I'm happy to be there, watching every step of the way. And thank all of you. And I don't want to go too much longer because I hated covering these things when I was a media guy.
To introduce our next honoree, I'd like to call up here Marta from CBS News Sunday Morning. Mo, come on up.
So I think at its best, CBS Sunday Morning makes people interested in things they didn't expect to be interested in. And no one does that better than Marta Teichner. She really is a model for all of us. First of all, she's a brilliant writer. I'd say she's the best writer in the business, but I don't want to start a food fight here. And she's got a voice to match her contralto. I mean, it matches in depth and in richness her writing. Those are just two of the tools in her toolbox, but what really makes Marta Marta is her penetrating curiosity. It's never faked. She wants to know, and she makes everyone at home want to know. I mean, she could do a story on the history of the paperclip and make it more gripping than the Hurt Locker. And she brings that kind of level of drama and depth. She's covered so many different topics. The range is really kind of astonishing on the show over her decades. Ancient religions, food, culture, great writers. But I want to talk about one of her celebrity profiles, which remains one of my favorite pieces on the show. It's when she profiled the singer Michael Bolton. And first of all, there was the way that Marta intoned about his hair. Just the way you talked about his hair. And the way you gently probed about the trauma of when Michael Bolton cut his hair. They ended up singing in the foyer of his house. But more than anything, she respected the material and the subject. She really wanted to know why Michael Bolton had been such a success. And she let us in on that. I don't know if you know this, but some of us in the office like to imagine you kind of covering kind of junky pop culture and you kind of how you would ennoble it. And one of my favorites, I just love to imagine you saying, Orange County, Atlanta, Beverly Hills. They seem to be everywhere. But are they real? Are they actual housewives? She is just as curious off camera, in the good way curious, off camera as she is on. I've never traveled with her. We work in parallel, but producers tell me there's nothing like watching her order at a restaurant, deposing the wait staff on specials. She once asked a waitress at an Applebee's for the wine list because she wanted to know. We have red. I think that's what she said. What kind? It's red. For Martha's colleagues and her fans, it's always joyful to watch her pursue a story. She really is a model and an inspiration for all of us at the show, and I think for so many people out there. So, ladies and gentlemen, I give you my friend and inspiration, Marta Teichner.
Blue and gold, my high school colors. Wow, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm really, really honored. Thank you to Mo. Thank you to the Deadline Club. Thank you to my colleagues at CBS News. My parents bought our first television in 1954 so they could watch the Army McCarthy hearings. At the age of 6, I only grasped the basic details of who was being accused of what. But the images I saw in black and white, sitting cross-legged on the floor right in front of our television set, watching the snowy screen, had a powerful and indelible effect on me. Senator Joseph McCarthy and his lawyer, Roy Cohn, snarling at their questioners, sneering, were terrifying. My eyes and ears told me who they were, what they were. Suddenly, news wasn't just something adults read quietly in a corner under a lamp in the evening, words on a page. News was a living thing, real. The power of it took hold of me and hasn't ever let go. My relatives all joked that I was destined to be in television news because a couple of years later, at the age of 8, I developed a huge crush on Chet Huntley. Huntley and David Brinkley anchored the 1956 political conventions for NBC, and after constructing a 30-foot antenna on top of the hill behind our house, that's what we could watch in rural northern Michigan. But it was actually troubled times that got me into news. I came of age in the late 60s when the country was divided over civil rights and the Vietnam War. It felt, as it does now, as if the United States was torn to pieces. There was no nuance. It got lost somewhere in the anger, the deeply emotional, ideological tug of war. Just out of college, I couldn't judge what was true. I was working for MIT Press then. The college sponsored a panel on the coverage of controversial events. Kresge Auditorium, 1,200 plus seats, packed. I went hoping that somehow I would hear something that would help me sort through the noise. Fred Friendly and Mike Wallace were there, representing TV News, and Thomas Winship, who was editor of the Boston Globe. There were representatives of weekly and monthly magazines and the FCC. Until that night, it had never occurred to me that each of these news organizations, by their nature, covered controversial events differently. News was news, right? I asked a question. Fred Friendly pointed out I was the only girl who had. It was as if I had been struck by lightning. This was what I had to do with my life. As a reporter, I thought, if I covered events, observing fully and fairly, if I processed what I had witnessed and then told those stories, I might not get to any absolute truth, but I could at least get as close as possible. I quit my job at MIT Press and returned home, which was in Grand Rapids, Michigan by then, hoping to earn enough money to go to graduate school in journalism. Eventually, I answered a want ad in the Grand Rapids Press for a radio news man. Not the usual way you find a job in journalism. I applied in spite of not being a man, having never been in a radio station, and knowing nothing about broadcasting or journalism. I had never spoken into a microphone. To my shock, after being asked to pull wire copy, then write and deliver a 5-minute newscast, WJEF Country Western Radio hired me to be one of its 2 reporters. Some listeners complained. One wrote in that he didn't want a woman cluttering up his airwaves. WJEF was a great place to teach myself to be a reporter by watching how my competitors worked, copying what was good, learning from my mistakes. As for becoming a broadcaster, I like to say I learned from the best. WJEF was a CBS affiliate. At night, after my shift was over, I'd transcribe the twice-daily 15-minute CBS radio newscasts anchored by the likes of Charles Collingwood or Douglas Edwards, Eric Severide, or Walter Cronkite. I'd play them back and read along karaoke style in order to learn how to write for my own voice, how to pace my sentences, as they did, so I wouldn't run out of breath before the period. I realized that most of those men, at that time, all men, of course, had worked overseas, regarding the United States and its place in the world. From an ocean away, they had covered wars. Their experiences and time had given them perspective and wisdom and style. I dared to be greedy for a career like that. But here I was at WJEF Country Western Radio, where all the disc jockeys were called cousin somebody. And the stakes were low. My first day on the job, while Rick London, as WJEF's other reporter called himself on the air, showed me around, he stopped talking mid-word to listen to the police scanner. Officers were being sent to a nearby spot on the Grand River to investigate a possible drowning. We got there as men in a boat were dragging a floating blob to shore with a hooked pole. When they turned it over, what I saw hardly looked like a human being. I had to steady myself against a tree to keep from fainting or being sick. A male, but what age? What race? How? Why did he end up in the river? Who was he? I got into news to chase truth with a capital T. But what was this? I learned it was lesson 1 in understanding that news can be a small tragedy. It doesn't have to be D-Day or politics. I learned that I couldn't stop myself from feeling while working, and that's a good thing. Years later, while I was the CBS correspondent in Johannesburg, my producer, a camera crew, and I raced to a massacre in KwaZulu near Durban. A tribal faction had entered a house in the middle of the night looking for an enemy. They slaughtered 13 people, 7 of them children. It turned out the guy they were after wasn't even there. When we finally made it to the scene, the bodies were gone. Too late. Story over, my colleagues said. They didn't even notice what I saw, the women. There was blood everywhere, 6 women, old, heavy-set, in shapeless dresses, their feet bare, their heads covered, were slowly mopping the blood away, swaying, singing, in the kind of haunting harmony I've only ever heard the likes of in Africa. That was the story. It was as ancient a ritual as the history of human conflict. Profound, and so telling about the cost of violence, of war, the mundane, below-the-headline detail that says so much about history. I spent a dozen years as a foreign correspondent witnessing history, a lot of it violent, but not all. In South Africa, Mozambique, Malawi, El Salvador, Mexico, Honduras, England, Northern Ireland, Lebanon, Israel, Iraq, Kuwait, East Germany, Russia, Bulgaria, Hungary, Georgia, Romania, Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia, Poland, China. I was in Spain when Picasso's painting Guernica was returned home. In Syria, I went to Malula, a village carved into the side of a mountain, where the people still speak Aramaic, the language of Jesus. How's that for magical? And then there's everything I've seen and done in the United States, all the fascinating people I've met, especially working for CBS Sunday Morning. I learned that journalism is the greatest adventure there is and the greatest education. I also learned that it's not just a job. Each day on assignment is a day out of my life to be lived fully. It's not just something that gets in the way of my life. I learned, as Bill Whitaker pointed out, what a privilege it is to be allowed to tell stories and the importance of telling them. Like every other woman of my generation helping to break down barriers in news, I experienced sexism, sexual harassment, even sexual assault. There were setbacks, but I endured, overcame, sacrificed, outlasted. It was worth it. I hope I helped ease the way for other women. Today, I'm not sure it's possible to have a career in television news like mine anymore. News is so fragmented and fragile. The country is even more divided than it was when I first wondered how to figure out what was true. I'm still trying. And I'm deeply grateful for the 50-plus years I've been able to keep at it, and for this award. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kristen Salumi. I'm here on behalf of the Deadline Club by day. I'm a correspondent for the Al Jazeera Media Network based here in New York. And I'd like to call up Melissa Russo, the politics and government affairs reporter for News 4 New York, on behalf of the NBC family that we have gathered here to introduce the one, the only Chuck Scarborough, longtime anchor for News 4 New York. Melissa, thank you.
Thank you so much, Kristen. I'm going to hold this. This is how we do it in TV. It'll be easier. 26 years ago, when I started at WNBC, I would have argued that Chuck Scarborough was already worthy back then of the Journalism Hall of Fame. I never imagined that I would have the honor of introducing him for the honor that he so deservedly accepts here today. In reflecting on a quarter century of working with Chuck, I'm drawn to some memories from my very first week at what we used to call News Channel 4. Day one, the feeling of wonderment, stepping into 30 Rock with the opportunity of a lifetime, to work at my dream television station, the one that was iconic, credible, polished, and smart, in large part because of Chuck Scarborough. And of course, Sue Simmons, his amazing co-anchor, who is still seated by his side today. On day 5 at the station, I met Chuck, not in person, but as he tossed to me on live television in the field on election night. It was my first major test as the station's new government reporter, but Chuck's warm, lighthearted demeanor and his sharp political questions were so engaging that they distracted me from the crippling nervousness that I had and made for a successful election night. I could never have imagined how many times Chuck's steadiness, his ability to contextualize events as they were happening in real time, would provide a calming voice, not only for our viewers in the tri-state area, but for those of us who are out in the field covering these events, 9/11, Hurricane Sandy, COVID-19. On day 6 of my new job, the morning after the election, on my desk, Chuck had left a handwritten note reflecting on our election coverage from the night before and welcoming me to the team. It was quintessential Chuck. It was old school Instead of firing off an email, Chuck picked up a pen. Instead of sitting in the comfort of his office, Chuck would be out in the newsroom mentoring his coworkers. Instead of relying on the teleprompter, Chuck took pleasure, as we've heard about some of our other honorees here, in recrafting copy with precision. He would walk out to our executive producer, Jesse Hamilton, and he would say, "I've reworked the 6 o'clock tease. Please check it out. I think you're gonna like it." So excited about the tease after 50 years on the job. His interest in every detail was impressive. I love that he was interested in what I covered. Stories about politics, investigations about services for the homeless or the elderly, and he would ask me questions that I hadn't even thought of while putting the stories together. Sometimes he would ask me those questions on live television, catching me and our control room off guard. Chuck taught us to look for new sources to balance our reporting. The importance of pulling the plug on a story when the tip is not as advertised. The importance of pushing back against any of our reporting being influenced by bias. In his amazing way, Chuck has always been an old soul, old school but never outdated. He believed in a press corps that was skeptical yet respectful, always mindful of the importance of maintaining trust with viewers and mindful of how fragile that trust could be. And that was way before trust in the media eroded to the point where we are today. After this contentious past year being in the center of both the national and New York City political scene, moderating debates with my amazing coworker David Ushery, Chuck's successor, and of also witnessing political violence and threats of such right here in our city, it feels like an appropriate time right now to reflect on Chuck's guiding principles. They've never changed. Each day since Chuck's retirement, I have heard his words from his last newscast replay as I enter the building. That we should behold that feeling of walking into 30 Rock, not just on day one, but every day, knowing that we work here. What we do is important, to feel the weight of the responsibility to get it right. And hoping that our role as journalists may contribute to a more perfect union. As I mentioned, Chuck's view towards covering politicians was to have some skepticism, but also respect. And I will never forget the time that Chuck was so concerned after having a coughing fit, this is off the record, having a coughing fit during our short-lived Ask the Mayor series. We were taping it, and Mayor de Blasio had a bit of a fit and stormed off the set. We might have made him late, which is a bit ironic. But I told Chuck, don't worry, he's going to get over it. But Chuck was so respectful, he was concerned. I feel the weight of doing right by you in this introduction, Chuck. I know it's been an adjustment for you to pull back from the exceptional role that you played for our viewers and for your coworkers, because this work is such a part of your identity. And I want you to know that it's been hard for us too, because you are a part of our identity. Dave Price misses the fact that he does not have the chance to see if you will ever just once walk into the newsroom after cutting yourself shaving or having a bad haircut. He just thought maybe one day there would be something imperfect. It never happened. Sorry, Dave. And Chuck will miss your sense of humor. Along with Sue, we would laugh so hard sometimes that we would pray the commercial break would last for another 3 minutes so we could collect ourselves. But I just want to say, you know, unlike the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree that just arrived and will be gone soon enough, as it is every season, Chuck, your roots are still planted deeply in 30 Rock and in our news organization. As for that handwritten note you left on my desk that day, my mother framed it and kept it displayed in her living room like a trophy for the rest of her life. Your stamp of approval had made her prouder than any of the images of me interviewing mayors or presidents. And recently, our executive producer, Jesse, mentioned to me that more important to him than any of the awards he had earned in his career was just knowing that Chuck was happy and proud with the product that he and we had produced. Chuck, you should be proud. We love you. We wish you congratulations. Ladies and gentlemen, Chuck Scarborough.
Wow. Melissa, you almost had me in tears straight away here, right? I've got to make a speech. That was absolutely fabulous. Is this thing still on? Okay, good. You can hear me all right? Good. Yeah. What a wonderful introduction that was, indeed. And I, of course, want to thank the Deadline Club for this extraordinary honor. I have to confess, after listening to that introduction and to Martha particularly, I feel a little bit like Senator John Warner must have felt when he became Elizabeth Taylor's sixth husband. I know what to do, I'm just not sure I know how to make it interesting. And I'm so glad to see so many of my former NBC colleagues here with me at the 2 tables worth of NBC colleagues. I wasn't sure I could even get them to come here after all that extravagant 50th anniversary celebration we had. And the 9 months later, my extravagant retirement send-off. I didn't think I could get them to come to another Chuck event, but here they came, and I'm so grateful for all of you for being here, and for my beautiful and brilliant wife for once again coming to one of these occasions with me, Ellen. Melissa mentioned how difficult stepping down from the anchor desk, the NBC4 anchor desk, had to have been after more than 50 years there. It was difficult. It was certainly a terrible adjustment that I had to make, emotionally, spiritually, everything happened. I found an organization, a sister organization here, that was actually quite helpful, AA. Anchors Anonymous. I'm looking at you, David. I'm pleased to report, I'm honored now, I'm proud to announce that as of now, I have gone 343 days, 14 hours, and 25 minutes without makeup. But that's been plenty of time to reflect on a career that actually spanned 6 decades. It's an extraordinary thing to do, to have time to think back on that. And what I realized was that my fondest memories do not involve the anchor desk. Certainly anchoring those big breaking stories, sitting at the vortex of a news organization, lighting the afterburners, going all out to cover a story, advancing it live in real time, filling out, fleshing it out, all of that, covering those blizzards and the hurricanes and the political upheavals and riots and all of that. 9/11, certainly, all of that is challenging, interesting, exciting. It's fun, it's memorable. But my most cherished memories are of the stories that took me away from all of that, away from the desk, out into the field. There is, I don't know how to put it, but there is a rich sort of creative intimacy in going into the field. It's just you, your research, your cameraman, photographer, and the story. You focus on that. And when that works, when that really comes together, that is a true joy. A Ku Klux Klan rally at Stone Mountain, Georgia. The inaugural flight of the Concorde from Paris to New York. And just an aside on that, the night before, Agency French Press got a note from the Red Brigades. Anybody remember the Red Brigades terrorist group? Okay. They got a note. It was very clear. It was the Concorde in the crosshairs of a sight. They intended to shoot the Concorde down. I was seated on the plane right behind Walter Cronkite. And as we rolled down the runway for that first flight, heading to New York, I thought, if they do shoot it down, the headline's going to be, Walter Cronkite and several other journalists were killed. The reunion in the Ardennes forest between soldiers that tried to kill themselves in the Second World War at the Battle of the Bulge, one of them German, 2 American. The seething anger of a baker in a Palestinian refugee camp. A whistleblower story that proved the old editor's admonition to beware of finding what you're looking for. It seemed to be one of those obvious David and Goliath stories, little guy against a multinational corporation. Well, a 2-month investigation stood that story on its head. The mysterious man in the red bandana, who saved as many as 18 lives on 9/11 but lost his own. We found out who he was, and I did his story. The hunt for an al-Qaeda affiliate in the southern Philippines after 9/11, that was the Abu Sayyaf group. A member of that group, Ramzi Youssef, had planted the bomb onto the World Trade Center in 1993. The aching incongruity of a Norman Rockwell village bedecked in Christmas trappings, its holiday trees sparkling brightly, with 20 first graders lying dead on the floor of a school called Sandy Hook Elementary. That still is a difficult story to remember. But the hundreds of stories spanning 6 decades, each one in its own way, visiting me occasionally and reminding me of why we do what we do. The technology has changed considerably over time. What we did initially in the 1960s, we did with a 16 millimeter World War II vintage combat camera called a Filmo, shooting footage. By 1974, technology had advanced. We went to 16 millimeter color reversal film. In fact, when I covered that inaugural flight of the Concorde, what they were using in the Paris Bureau, still using film in 1977. In fact, the last obstacle to getting a story on air, because film had to be flown from Paris to New York to make the nightly news, the last obstacle to getting a story on their deadline were the French baggage handlers, who were often keen to do a wildcat strike. I got caught once by that too, missed the deadline. Electronic cameras accelerated the process of news gathering. Digital editing replaced analog, supercharging it, allowing us to turn stories faster and to pack much more information into them. The audience for television's sector of what we now call the legacy media was enormous, and it was growing, as was the ad-based financial underpinning that paid for our news gathering. Then the internet democratized mass communication. Suddenly, everybody had access to a global audience and fractured it. Social media has now replaced television as the top way American adults get their news. And as the demographics get younger, that divide gets larger. The gravitational pull of confirmation bias gained vast new purchase. Algorithms and opinion-oriented cable channels, herding the citizenry into like-minded silos, abetted by AI and social media fictions. It has never been, as has been pointed out here on this occasion by several others here, it has never been more important right now for all of us to hew to the basic principles of accuracy, objectivity, and fairness. I know that this organization is quite capable of that. I know this is the place that can really help in what is an increasingly more difficult environment for broadcast journalism and journalism generally. But as we forge through this, I'm confident that the people in the room, especially the people of my NBC posse at those two tables, are up to the task of finding the way through the new world of fractured journalism and AI. And let me just go around very quickly and introduce the others besides Melissa. Amy Morris, Senior Vice President of News, is with us, very bright. Janice Huff, we have 3 weathercasters there. Janice Huff, Dave Price, and Al Roker, who redefined the role of weathercasting. Jesse Hamilton, executive producer. Jonathan Dienst is here. He's the most dangerous investigative reporter in the room and, in fact, in the city. Bruce Beck, superb sportscaster. Triple threat Ushery is here. Great writer, great reporter, and great anchorman. David Ushery. Tom Yamas, the anchor of NBC Nightly News. In the long history of NBC Nightly News, starting if you want to go back to John Cameron Swayze and the Camel News Caravan, I think in 1954. In the 70 years of NBC Nightly News, there have been 10 anchors. He is number 10, and he's doing very well. He told me, in fact, Nightly News was number 1 in the ratings last week. Natalie Pasquarella, my co-anchor for the last decade of my time at NBC, and she is just a fabulous person. She's a delightful person. She's a terrific broadcast journalist, and she is full of energy. Yesterday, she climbed to the top of the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree. Somehow, that never occurred to me in 50 years to do that. But. And last but not least, my partner of 32 and a half years, Sue Simmons, is with us. She's back. You have no idea how much fun it is working next to a woman for 32 and a half years with no impulse control. Sue has never had an unspoken thought. And it was evident today at the table. The quiet heckling that maybe you heard, maybe you didn't. I have to tell one, don't I? One classic Sue moment. How about the baby whale? Is that thumbs up? After the weather, we usually, it's sort of a soft spot in the newscast, and Sue did a voiceover about a baby whale that had washed ashore on Long Island, and a group of marine biologists were trying to nurse it back to health, and her co-anchor said something typically kind of inane, said something like, boy, I hope he gets well. And Sue said, oh, I do too, and if he gets well, I'll kiss his little blowhole. I could go on for a long time on that, but I think that is quite sufficient. I do want to, though, leave you with the parting words of one of the smartest assignment editors that we have, Howard Price. These are his words. We've been given an amazing and unique privilege, you and I, to be the stewards of truth, the vanguards of democracy, the most powerful writers of wrong, the most influential agents of meaningful, often historic change, the authors of the first draft of history. That's our writ. I am honored to be here, honored to join this august group of people who have been inducted to this Hall of Fame. It is one of the highlights of my career. I thank you very deeply.
Greetings, everyone. I'm Claire Regan, past president of the Deadline Club and past national president of SPJ. When Tina Brown's fingers hit the keyboard, watch out and get ready for all hell to break loose. In the Substack diary she launched last year, she shares observations, rants, news obsessions, and human exchanges with a wildly eclectic cast of characters who populate her seething inbox. She calls it fresh hell. Donald Trump, the royal family, Zohran Mamdani, no one is off limits. And more than 69,000 subscribers are taking it all in. Actually, newsflash, I have a good source at table 8 that tells me that number is now 71,000 subscribers. Now, in what she calls the third trimester of her life, Tina recently told the New York Times that she feels liberated. Second news flash from Table 8, that interview with the New York Times from last weekend is now #1 on Apple Podcasts. She has been informing, entertaining, and enlightening the world for decades as an award-winning journalist, editor, and author. Through it all, she has stayed relevant and newsworthy as an enduring influencer. From 1979 to 2001, she was editor-in-chief of 4 of the biggest brands in the business: Tatler, Vanity Fair, The New Yorker, and Talk magazines, where she supervised her share of large staffs and big egos. She was only 30 when she took over Vanity Fair. In 2008, she launched The Daily Beast, independent, irreverent, and intelligent. Like its founder, the website's journalism is nonpartisan but not neutral, skeptical but never cynical. Tina is the author of several best-selling books, including 2022's The Palace Papers, Inside the House of Windsor, The Truth and the Turmoil. It's a follow-up to her 2007 best-selling biography of the Princess of Wales, The Diana Chronicles. She is also the author of the highly acclaimed The Vanity Fair Diaries. Her writing has been dubbed frothy and forthright, and she describes herself as a transatlantic media diva. From 1981 until his death in 2020, Tina was married to the editor, publisher, and historian Sir Harold Evans. She is the mother of 2 and lives in New York City. For her services to journalism, she was awarded the honor of Commander of the Order of the British Empire by Queen Elizabeth in 2000. She was inducted into the Magazine Editors Hall of Fame in 2007. Today, we add another Hall of Fame membership to her list. The Deadline Club salutes a grande dame of the printed word, Tina Brown. Please come up.
Claire, you did that even better than the Queen when she pinned on that award for me. And she said to me, the only thing, she always says one thing, the Queen, when she gave you something. And she said, "Are you here now or over there?" I said, "I'm over there, Mum." "Oh, bravo." So this is a huge honor to be here. And I really do thank you, Deadline Club, for bestowing on me this remarkable honor, frankly, and to be with so many stewards of truth, as Chuck so memorably said. Also wonderful, I have to say, to be here with my dear old friend Keith Kelly. Where are you, Keith? Yes, okay. So, it's absolutely true what Jesse said. I mean, you had to take his calls because he knew something you didn't know. I used to dread those calls, by the way, Keith. Do everything I can to avoid them. Because I had to listen, though, because he always knew what was happening at Condé Nast, before anybody who worked there. And so I had to know, am I fired? Who just got stolen from my staff? Now, little did I know that there would come a time when it was a luxury even to have a staff, by the way. We've heard so much recently about the glory days of big expense accounts, town cars, fat salaries at Condé Nast. But that really wasn't what made them the glory days. It was the creative freedom, the editorial independence that came from working in an industry that was thriving and full of the kind of talents you see in this room. And of course, that was before the multiple assaults on the publishing business model and the supine position of media managements who seem to think giving away content for free and allowing others to monetize it was somehow a sustainable path for the future. And here we are. So what I treasure, though, from my own editing days was the collegial passion, non-stop hilarity of working in person, not on a Zoom, with brilliant, hand-picked colleagues who cared as much as I did that only the very best would do. Convincing a fervent writer that cutting his or her long wind-up at the top of a piece wasn't stealing their soul, but a preventative action against sending readers to sleep. Adjudicating heated debates in the art department about the choice of the Vanity Fair cover shot. If the design director had to spend 5 minutes telling me what the photographer meant by the moody black and white palette, it was a sure sign of being a dud cover. To prove a point, I would sometimes snatch that mock-up and race it down to the newsstand in the lobby of 350 Madison Avenue, plonk it next to the come-hither offerings of Harper's Bazaar or Architectural Digest, just to sort of prove my point that this cover wasn't going to fly. But I can't believe I had the opportunity to bring in and work with just so many incredible people. I mean, at the New Yorker, to work side by side with such greats as David Remnick, Malcolm Gladwell, Jane Mayer, Hilton Owls, Anthony Lane, just a few I brought in, and to open the closed windows of typeface with the New Yorker's first staff photographer, Richard Avedon, new cover artists like Art Spiegelman. And I think what I treasure perhaps most was the amazing way we were able to sort of slowly but surely change the New Yorker into a kind of a matriarchy, an editing matriarchy. My right hand was Pam McCarthy, and there was the superb Dorothy Wickenden and the visionary cover artist editor, Françoise Mouly, and Talk of the Town's inspired editor, Susan Morrison. They were really incredible, and we all had one thing in common. We all had children under 5 years old, and so we sort of covered for each other in a kind of wonderful way. You know, we were working together, but we were also very aware that, on Monday, Pam had to go to field day at her school, or Dorothy's nanny had gone sick, and it was a really kind of wonderful solidarity, if you like, female solidarity that existed amongst those editors at the New Yorker. And then I was so lucky to have that good fortune that Barry Diller invited me to launch a digital news platform that he actually allowed me to call the Daily Beast, which, no kind of focus group would have ever come across such a crazy title, but it was the name of the chaotic newspaper in my favorite Evelyn Waugh novel, Scoop, and I always felt the Daily Beast had a kind of antic, feral sound, and he loved it too. So I was really enormously lucky to be leading, deciding, rejecting, i.e. being an editor, rather than that strangely sterile-sounding recent invention of a chief content officer. Very, very, very sort of sinister phrase, in my view. But thrilling though it all was, I don't spend my days now in a perpetual state of lament for magazines of that time. There's never been a richer supply, actually, of editorial talent that keeps finding new ways to express itself, tell stories, uncover malfeasance, look out and search out the great smaller stories that Martha spoke so beautifully about. And the wonderful upside of the digital reach is that you can really tap talent from all over the world. I've worked on projects recently where there's been someone in India, somebody in Texas, somebody in London, and we're all on Zoom and we're all talking and we're actually creating things. In 2022, to honor my late husband, Harry, I launched a foundation in his name that awards an annual investigative journalism fellowship to a rising reporter who gets to spend 9 months in the Reuters investigative department in London. It's really been such a gratifying thing to see these talents gush forth. Amazingly, our first Sir Harry Evans Fellow, Waylon Cunningham from Texas, was part of a Reuters team that won the Pulitzer Prize in 2024. And this year we were overwhelmed with over 800 global entries. It was stunning in their resourcefulness and originality. And what I love about these young journalists is we know they're not doing it for the money, right? There isn't any. And they haven't really got the prospects that we had of ending up at the top of some august masthead, but they are driven by conviction. They are driven for a desire to ferret out the truth and tell it in the way that they must. And so I've come to really love this tribe of young investigative journalists who are plunging ahead despite the lack of opportunities very often. Our fourth Sir Harry Fellow, by the way, was announced last week, and it's an amazing young Indian woman called Nandini Srinivasan, and I think she is a rock star. The proliferation of new platforms unencumbered by the cost of print journalism is spawning really fascinating new ways to reach audiences. When I was approached to write a weekly newsletter for Substack, I just didn't know what it would feel like. It's like swimming naked. There is nobody there except for you, right? I was used to sending in a pieces, somebody calling me, there was a reaction, there was a legal read. Zero, which is a little sort of spooky. But I actually had no idea how much fun it would be simply to press the publish button on Fresh Hell, and within about 20 seconds, it would seem, I would get some zoom, an answer saying disagreeing with me or commenting or doing something. It is so instantaneous that, of course, it's extremely heady, and I think I've found something finally commensurate to my impatience. So I want to thank this amazing group, the Deadline Club of New York. It's so important to keep reminding ourselves of the great days, but also how the talent is still there. The talent is really there. And I think, as Chuck said, we have to find our way, our new way to sort of surge through this viral chaos that we're in. I think we will find a way. I think we're in this kind of intermediate phase, which feels so deeply unsettling and unsatisfying in many ways. But I do believe it will somehow shake out into something that allows great talent to prosper. So I'm deeply appreciative. I thank you very, very much. And as I rather recklessly said on the Times podcast, sometimes dinosaurs can still rule the earth. Thank you.
Last but not least, I have the distinct honor of introducing one of the great radio reporters of one of the great radio stations in New York, which no longer is with us, sadly. It's WCBS 880. To introduce our final, but certainly not least, Deadline Club Hall of Fame honoree, let me call up Sean Adams. Sean?
That was very nice of you to say. Thank you very much. And the radio table over there, we're thinking about you. Let's bring it on home, shall we? I know people have to go back to work, right? Everyone has to go back to the office, is that? Charles Osgood, Ed Bradley, Art Athens, Irene Cornell. What do these folks have in common? Well, they're all in the New York Journalism Hall of Fame, and they all graced the airwaves at WCBS 880. That's true. And today we add Rich Lamb to that illustrious list. Rich, this is for you. It's not hyperbole to say that over his half-century on the radio, 43 years of which were at WCBS, 43, Rich, he covered everything. He was a spot news reporter. He was on the front lines, out on the street. He was a witness to history. I mean, and he did everything. Rich flew on the Pope's plane. He also rode on a Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade float with Barry Manilow in a white top hat and tails. To recount all those accomplishments would take too long, so I'm just going to tell you about Rich, the things that make Rich, Rich. To recount things like this, his poetry. Rich is a wordsmith. He's always known as someone who just, the English language, he owns it. Radio reporters, we get 40 seconds to tell a story. Rich told me right off the bat, send a postcard, paint pictures with words. So when Rich does a story, snowflakes dance, flames or tongues of fire, a dangling tree limb in a storm becomes the sword of Damocles. I mean, he just has this poetic touch. It simply wouldn't be St. Patrick's Day, Rich, without you talking about the sun-dappled spires of the cathedral. So Rich crafted these verbal snapshots, and when he did it with strict adherence to grammar. So he shunned split infinitives, dangling participles. He was a stickler about the proper use of farther and further, fewer and less. Rich shared these lessons in writing and reporting with countless students and interns, myself included there. He was always gracious, generous, and patient, a natural teacher. His favorite skill to pass on is a mnemonic device for remembering the U.S. presidents. If you have 10 minutes, he can get you there. I believe, you know, what makes Rich Lamb is really it's his heart. Rich is he's an emotional person. He cares. He's compassionate. He has a moral compass that was calibrated just right by his parents. He grew up in West Hartford. And, you know, you can see this. It's obvious in the way that he tends to his wife, Peggy, the way he volunteers with his church and the youth ministry. And if you get his Christmas card, you know it is a legendary thing. It always has a message of hope that can just pull you back from the depths of despair. He really has a special touch. On September 11th, 2001, I was at the World Trade Center. I ran from the collapse of the South Tower, and I reported all day, and afterward, they gave me a break. I bought some food, and I brought it to Rich. He was covering the Cardinal, and so he and I sat outside St. Patrick's Cathedral in the dark, and we sat there stunned and dismayed, and we watched the traffic lights change over and over with no cars on Fifth Avenue. Five times. And as I tried to process everything, it was Rich's reassuring words that really brought me some measure of comfort. If I had to pick one broadcast in particular that captures the essence of Rich Lamb, it would be this one. Pope John Paul II visited New York, 1979. At one point, the Pope walks past Rich. They made eye contact. And then Rich delivered this line live on the radio. He said, "The Pope just winked at me." And he said it with all sincerity because it was true. That's Rich, honest, accurate, and keenly aware that we are all human, even the Holy Father. The only part of that story, though, that we might never know, unless you want to tell us, did you wink back? It's my great honor on behalf of the Deadline Club to enshrine Rich Lamb as a member of the New York Journalism Hall of Fame.
First, I've had a cold, so my voice is a little shot. But, you know, I've got a script here, and I know you guys have listened to an awful lot of words today. I've skipped the poetry in this, although that was lovely of you to say. It's beyond a great honor. And, you know, radio guys, we read the script. We don't look up. So you'll just watch me read the script. It's beyond a great honor to follow the exalted figures who have been just named to the Deadline Club's Hall of Fame here ahead of me. I thought this was something about Ukraine, but I wasn't really. God help those people. Anyway, in the Catholic Church, before receiving communion, we say the words, "Lord, I am not worthy that you should come under my roof." The roof today is the Harvard Club, which if those who run this place could have seen my SAT scores, they would never have let me in this place. One very lucky moment, by the way, I want to talk to you about a lucky life. One very lucky moment came by meeting Sean Adams, then an NYU intern, now the superb talent who just introduced me, and at his NYU graduation party, introduced me to his Aunt Peggy Dolan, now my wife, and my luckiest choice ever. So, not unlike Marta Teichner, my first paying radio job was at a Michigan radio station. It was WEXL Royal Oak, and it was a 1,000-watt country music station whose motto was WEXL, hillbilly, and proud of it. The management had to move the studio to the back of the building after an unhappy listener had put a bullet through the picture window in the front. I was paid $87.50 for a 44-hour, 6-day work week. I had made more in my college summer job at a bakery. At WEXL, it dawned on me that Father Charles Coughlin, the infamous radio priest of the 1930s, had also been based in Royal Oak. I figured he must be dead. But when I took a look in, are you ready? The phone book, there he was. He agreed to an interview, and now I was terrified. Nixon was in China at the time, and all I can remember of that interview was that Coughlin said, very dramatically, "Nixon is now grasping the bloody red hand of Mao." Wow, it was a crazy, he was sitting alone in his living room, I don't know. It was. I also met Jimmy Hoffa out there. That's a longer story. I'm not going to. My career took me next to WNIC Dearborn and then to WOMC Detroit, where the GM and the program director seemed to take perverse delight in firing people. They literally had terminated everybody else on the air staff. And on the very day, one of the secretaries warned me that she had seen a memo that I was next. I got a call from a former colleague offering me a job at WXLO, then known as 99X, WOR's FM station in Manhattan. I couldn't even believe it. When I gave my notice, the red-faced GM threatened to blackball me in New York. I laughed in his face and I said, "Take that back or you'll be doing the morning news for the next 2 weeks." Anyway, 99X was a memorable place, and on the second floor of 1440 Broadway, initially my shift was 11:30 p.m. to 9 a.m., 6 days a week. It was a miserable schedule, but my income doubled because I had joined AFTRA, later, now SAG-AFTRA, union. Suddenly I was in New York and in the big-time radio. I was told that a short time before I had arrived, a nut with a Molotov cocktail had broken the glass on the station's front door, intending to set fire to the place. Luckily, he bled on his matches. That incident was on my mind when one morning about 5 a.m., working the overnights, I looked up to see somebody I did not know standing in the door of our newsroom. I said in my most unfriendly voice, "May I help you?" He answered, "I'm Elton John, and I'm looking for the studio." "Oh, Mr. John, right this way." On another morning around Thanksgiving, Cheech and Chong were guest hosting the morning show. This is the colorful little life I've been leading, you know? Anyway, when they broadcast a recipe that suggested stuffing the turkey with weed, the phone rang in the newsroom, and our general manager, Rick Devlin, ordered me to escort the pair out of the radio station before we lose our license. They said, "Oh, that's cool, man." At WXLO, I had the opportunity to be the morning news guy for Jay Thomas, a wild and very funny guy. It's a longer story, but suffice it to say, he got into some hot water. The offense, lip-syncing, uninvited, a song with Barry Manilow on the 99X float as it pulled up to Macy's during the Thanksgiving Day parade. NBC and Macy's went berserk. We were a band after that. It was he was. By the way, if you really want a big laugh, you gotta get on and take a look at Jay Thomas telling the Lone Ranger story. Write it down. You'll thank me. It's one of the funniest. Oh, you may have seen it already. Letterman made him do it every day. What was it, 11 years, Tony? He was on 11 years at Christmas time every year telling the story, and it's just hilarious. And actually, you know, Jay would come in at 5 o'clock in the morning. He was an ex-Marine, and he would put his feet up on the desk and do one-arm push-ups while we talked about what we're going to do. I'm thinking, this guy is something else. Anyway, so prior to writing my morning newscasts at 99X, I apologize for the voice, it's getting worse, I made certain to listen to WCBS radio to hear what they were doing. It was by far the best radio news operation that I had ever heard. Every anchor was tremendous. The reporters were all top class. The programming was tight. The whole thing was sophisticated. And I secretly yearned to work there. But when the great Steve Flanders, whom I had met at City Hall, suggested I audition for the soon-to-be vacated job then held by the iconic Jerry Nachman, I told Steve, "You got to be kidding." But he insisted. And so it was I landed at WCBS, believing I'd last about 2 weeks, when they figured out I really didn't know what I was doing. 43 years later, I walked out the door. Lots of memorable moments came and left, and here are just a few. One night, the word came that John O'Connor was going to be the new Archbishop of New York. So I drove through a snowstorm, arriving in the early morning hours in Scranton, Pennsylvania. I found him about to celebrate the 8 a.m. Mass, and I asked him for a few words about his appointment. He said the Vatican had barred him from talking about it till after 8 o'clock. I said, "Well, I won't use it till 10 after." He said, "Shoot." He was a character. But that meeting led to assignments in Rome, papal elections and funerals, as well as flying with Pope now St. John Paul II on board his plane. I also saw him down in Cuba. We were sent down to Cuba. And by the way, I saw Fidel down there. He arrived in a Mercedes-Benz, and he had a $2,000 Italian suit on. That's when I knew the revolution had succeeded. Another night, nothing was happening. I was sent to the Roosevelt Hotel, where Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan was receiving the Liberal Party endorsement. Right, okay. I was thinking, there's no possible story here. When, before anyone else had even hinted at it publicly, Moynihan, in his inimitable style, said, "We have won the Cold War." He spoke of the pathetic state of the Soviet army and said it was all over. I was astounded and pumped that I had this great story. I went to put together pieces for the morning, and I did it. And when I didn't hear them, I called the morning editor, who said, "The Wires and the Times didn't have it, and I didn't feel comfortable running it." I was not happy. But that's not the end of the story. So here's the cool end of this story. At least I think it's cool. Later that week, I found myself at a regional journalist luncheon at the White House. Remember they used to do stuff like that? Nice guys down there. Howard Baker was then Reagan's chief of staff. I was sitting at his table, and I told him of Moynihan's won the Cold War declaration. Baker looked shocked. He said, "Pat Moynihan said that?" Very shortly, Reagan was saying that. I don't know, I thought it was kind of cool. Let's swing back to New York. I did 90 hours of call-in talk shows over 8 years with Rudy Giuliani. As you know, he loved verbal combat, but this one night stands out. Rudy had just threatened to defund the Brooklyn Museum over a piece of art depicting the Virgin Mary stained with elephant dung. A caller questioned the mayor's moral outrage, saying, "How can you hold yourself out as a judge of morality when nightly, quote, you fornicate with a woman who is not your wife in Gracie Mansion?" Judy Nathan, who had been in the studio, ran out in tears. I was so stunned by the call that I forgot to step on the kill switch, and the whole thing went on the air. Giuliani went white with rage, and he said, "Mr. Mayor," I said, "Mr. Mayor, shall we go to a commercial?" He said, "That guy's a jerk. No, go to the next caller." That was Giuliani in a nutshell. Ed Koch, rest his soul, was so much fun. After his mayoralty, you know, he earned the title of unavoidable for comment. During the Iran hostage crisis, the main antagonist, as you'll remember, was the Ayatollah Khomeini. Didn't everybody love him? Koch, at an unrelated news conference, was asked a question outside of the purview of the mayor. He exploded, saying, "I am not the Mayatollah." During his green card problems, I had a chance to interview John Lennon. I wondered why he wanted to live in the U.S. He said 2,000 years ago, everybody wanted to live in Rome. 4 years later, I covered his murder, a very sad day for me, a big Beatles fan, and as well for many others in the city that Lennon loved. Oh, here's a crazy one, and I'm getting toward the end, all right? I know you're feeling good about that. All right, still another night when not much was happening. I was sent to Hugh Carey's campaign fundraiser at the Waldorf. Doesn't that sound like a good story, huh? I threw together a piece. It was like, I don't know, something along the lines of, you know, at my birthday party, nobody had a whole ballroom and a live orchestra. No, we played Pin the Tail on the Donkey or something. Whatever the piece was, a nonsense piece. So I'm trying to get through the copy, bent over on the side of the room, trying to read this into a microphone. Then there came an insistent tapping on my shoulder from behind. I thought it was a colleague trying to get me to boot a word, which I promptly did. I whirled around, ready to yell at the wise guy, and found myself face to face with Frank Sinatra, who said, "Be good to me, kid." And he laughed. Surrounded by his posse, walked away, and I stood there like an idiot. I didn't even say, "Well, good, how about a few words, you know?" No, I was like, "What? Frank Sinatra?" All right. For sure, 9/11 has to be mentioned here and clearly remembered in all its shock and terrible grief. I was chosen to go to Ground Zero when the president came to see it a couple of days later. And because a state cop that I had known from the Mario Cuomo call-in talk show days showed me exactly where to stand, I was 10 feet from George Bush and his bullhorn when he told the chanting construction workers that those who knocked the buildings down would soon be hearing from us. But what I remember most clearly from that day was being in the motorcade after POTUS visited the families at the Javits Center. As we crossed 42nd Street, people with candles and flags lined the street, and you felt the power of the people and the grief of a great nation in your very heart and soul. Mercifully, that brings me to my last hurrah. The mission statement of the organization installing us begs to be clearly heard, and I would ask your indulgence to read part of it. The Deadline Club and the Society of Professional Journalists' mission is, and I quote, "To ensure that the concept of self-government outlined by the U.S. Constitution remains a reality into future centuries. The American people must be well informed in order to make decisions regarding their lives and their local and national communities. It is the role of journalists to provide this information in an accurate, comprehensive, timely, and understandable manner. Amen."
Rich Lamb, everybody. I'd like to call all the Hall of Fame honorees up to the front. All of you who've hung around this long, please, all 6 of you. We'd like you up here for a group photo. You absolutely keep the medals on, and some of you didn't claim your box, your little jewelry box up here, so please get that. That's our email address for those of you who'd like to keep in touch with us. I hope you all do. And before you all go, we're going to get a quick group shot of everybody up here. Once everybody's up here, I'd like to, on behalf of the organization, thank you for gracing us with your presence today. We've got so much experience and so much professionalism right up here at the front of the room. I'd like to announce on behalf of the Deadline Club that you're also not just welcoming the new Hall of Fame honorees, you're welcoming the newest members of the Deadline Club. You're all getting complimentary one-year memberships from the club. So welcome to the club. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for coming. And as my good friend Betsy Ashton likes to say, please get out there and commit good journalism.